Hello and welcome to this HOI4 video. In this video I will show you in Man the Guns how you can defeat the Royal Navy. It was a question asked by one of my followers called FB, and it's very interesting because the Royal Navy is obviously the navy at the start of the Second World War, and the Brits lose this #1 position during the Second World War to the US. And it's very interesting to see in the game how you can actually defeat this grand fleet. In order to show you how how I've gone about researching this, is I'm firstly going to tell you what the Royal Navy looks like. Then I'm going to shortly explain how I went about testing, and I'm going to test for relatively common theories, I think, looking on the internet. So what does the Royal Navy have? Well, the Royal Navy has a fleet of about 200 ships in 1936, and the AI, so we're talking single player here, builds mainly screens. Actually, I haven't actually seen them queue up any capitals, so I'm not sure when they start doing that. But as you can see, they add a very nice amount of destroyers, screening their capitals, which is doesn't bode well for the sub-only proponents. So yeah, the theory is obviously that the Royal Navy has a large fleet, but it's outdated, it's spread across the globe, and a modernized, specialized force would actually be able to beat the Royal Navy in any given location. So what I did in this test, I ran the game on normal, playing as Nepal, playing until July 39 on historical, and everything actually went very historical, so that's good. I turned on instant construction, instant research, and I got my researches going, built a sample fleet in like 6-7 days, then turned AI on again and all that, declare war on Poland, and as such then the Second World War starts. And well, then I started fighting the Royal Navy. I only used the sample fleet, so I didn't use the excess navy that Germany has. So we only use what I'm actually showing you, and the remainder of the fleet is just stuck in port. Yeah, note that I didn't go for radars, I didn't go for the preemptive mining and all that, because I want to sort of show how you can defeat the Royal Navy and not like win the game, if that makes any sense to you. Moving on to sub only, I'm gonna show you in game. We have two types of subs to test. One of them contains 175 subs for 100k production, and these are the subs which have dual torpedoes. The 212 sub fleet has got a few more subs, but they only have one torpedo tube. The idea behind that is obviously that subs once spotted will die, so you may well just buy the cheapest version of them. It is sort of work equally well, but I do think that the one with higher torpedo attack is a bit more stable. Now, so let me show you how I did it. I'll just declare war on Poland. I'm going to ignore the land completely, and the subs go off and do their thing. They'll run into occasional battles with the scouting fleets, and then they do relatively well. But against the larger fleets, they just get wrecked. Right, so this should be an average battle against a scouting force, and obviously being a battle allows every 8 hours to your planes to drop in, and they will actually help out very neatly. And I do notice you will be losing subs a lot in this strat, and this is the good thing. This is actually a proper battle. So you will be losing subs, and the good thing is that you, as long as you stick around, in your own part of the sea, you can nicely control that part with all your subs, and they can retreat, and it's all nice and fine. And with your industrial production, you can easily sort of match your opponent or outproduce them. And I think that's why this strat was actually is that sort of popular or used. But if you run into a nicely screened force, you chew through your subs at such a high rate that I don't think the strat's really valid. You saw that happen. So we lost in this case bunch of subs, 20 subs, 2 light cruisers for not that much of the Royal Navy. So if you run into their carrier fleets, there, if we look at the details, basically their screens will chew up any discovered destroyers, and obviously the Air Force is very effective, being launched from a carrier. So eventually, this fleet is just gonna whittle away. Moving on to the traditional fleet. For Germany, I'm using panzer ships, but you can also use battle cruisers, I suppose. For this traditional fleet, using in terms of research, the trade interdiction until floating fortress. It boosts capital ships quite nicely, and also they have cruisers which I'm using. The air doctrine I have researched until naval strike, which is just pretty good for navs. It's going to help out quite a lot, because the idea of this force is to have a traditional force on the water, supported by your navs up high, and then have the the cheapest possible ships combined with the relatively cheap planes, and therefore be an effective force. So the heavy ship is therefore just a heavy gun with a lot of attack and piercing. It's got some light attack, not so much though, to keep the cost down, and it's got AA to basically provide the fleet with some AA, and also deter enemy aircraft from targeting these ships, because if ships have less than 5 anti-air, they get targeted more. Then we have our screens. Our screens consist of how many light cruisers? I believe 10 light cruisers, which basically are packed with light attack. They're there to rip enemy screens to shreds. And then we have our destroyers, and I think I'm using the same destroyer for every build. It's basically a very simple destroyer with a level 1 engine. It's got the level 2 gun, because I figure the 1.5 times the attack for only I believe 30 cost difference. What is it? It's 30. It's actually worth it. Other than that, it figures a fire control, so okay, should not have this. Anyway, level 1 engine, torpedoes, and depth charges. This is it. So it's pretty very basic. And this traditional fleet you just throw into the enemy while you have your air force soaring over the top. And I can tell you it does pretty well. It does very well at chewing up the enemy patrols. But once it's basically facing the big carrier fleets of the Brits, the carrier-based planes, they just destroy the fleet. So it's the apparent weakness of the fleet, which is indeed the actual weakness. So I would not recommend this, because it's not really worth it. You can defend your you can use this if you just only want to defend your bit of sea here. Then it's actually fine. But if you want to venture forth, then you gotta build something better. And one of those better options is using torpedo cruisers. So these come up obviously in a lot of forums, a lot of chats. I'll show you in game. So this build is all about having a great screen with navs above it, obviously boosted by the naval efficiency. In terms of naval doctrines, I've gone for the maximum boost for destroyers and light cruisers, which I think comes from the left hand part of the base strike tree. And in terms of research, I haven't really added a lot of special things. I think the Germans have already researched most of it. at the start, so it's basically a relatively standard 1936 cruiser. With, let me show you. So we have 16 light cruisers, and they have torpedo tubes and light attack. So all in all, you have 20 light attack, a large, huge torpedo attack actually, and they're very fast. And yeah, it's great. It's great. And they are screened by the basic destroyer, 890 cost, I believe, with just depth charges and the torpedo. And all that is covered in the air by a lot of navs, which have maximum range. I'm not sure if I mentioned that already, but they have maximum range, so that they actually cover the North Sea. Now this fleet does very well. It chews up patrols, and it actually does very well against the British fleets. But I think the drawback is that you do take losses relatively continuously. So it's pretty good, but you lose a lot of you lose the screens, you lose the destroyers, and it's also very easy to use because the when you're using the buttons, you know, in terms of automatic split off, works really well because your fleet sort of stays at the same power. And high, medium, and low risk work really well because the AI is very capable of detecting what is actually a favorable trade-off. So because you will be losing ships continuously, you want to sort of feel when you're losing too much, and then you put your fleet at low risk. When you think you have the industrial power to actually cope with a bit of losses, and you go for high risk. It works really well, and therefore I would recommend trying it. It's a lot of fun to play around with, and it's also very cheap to get into, so you don't need many researchers. It's all in all, it's a very effective strat, but I do think you running into the big fleets, you do lose a lot of your destroyers and some of the lights as well. As for the last strat, carriers. In terms of research, you do need to spend a lot more time because you need to get the airplanes, and you need to get the naval doctrines. I've actually, this is by accident, but I think it's still good. You need to boost the escorts, and you need to get as far down as the right side of the trees you can get. Now I've assumed here that you get until mass strikes, but obviously if you focus this and you spend the XP on it as well, you may be able to get further. The fleet looks as follows. So we've got 4 carriers, 4 heavy cruisers, 5 lights, and 27 destroyers. All in all, you get 32 screens and 8 capitals, giving you the 4:1 screen ratio. The carrier is very simple. It's just got deck space and an engine. You can actually go for the level 1 engine as well if you like. Doesn't even have anti-air because basically you don't deter enemy planes to go for this capital ship. When you do put 2.2 anti-air on it, it's just not enough. So I'm just making them as cheap as possible. So you can build 4 of these, and then you have 4 heavy cruisers to shield them. These are meat shields only. They're as cheap as possible. They have maximum armor, do have the heavy battery, and one secondary gun. You can argue about the fire control system. It's maybe not really needed. Anyway, it's still there. This is just a tank. It's called tank as well. This is the tank for the carriers. Then we have 5 lights, and these are basically there to chew up the enemy force, and the speed is tuned to match the destroyers. Oh no, the heavy tanks. Sorry, because the heavy cruisers, they that's why I didn't add any equipment here as well. I want to keep them as fast as possible. And then we have our basic destroyer attached as well. So this fleet is just it. This is very nice. I love playing with this. You can move around with them. You can do different sorts of missions. Um, it's just the most stable method. They easily boss the Eastern North Sea. Just the ships from the carriers, sorry, the aircraft from the carriers, they do so well. They have the 500% boost to something. Read the wiki. And they just do so well. I think this is the coolest method, but it takes the most investment in terms of research time. Yeah, because this fleet actually moves at 31.1 knots, it'll outrun the Royal Navy's fleet. So you get these engagements, which I'll show some in-game footage of, where you meet with a traditional Royal Navy fleet and you just engage and your carriers start fleeing right away, but your Air Force just keeps pounding them as they flee, as they try to follow you, but they can't because they're too slow. So it's just great. Alright, so concluding, I think the two valid strats are the using the carriers or using the light cruisers with torpedoes on it. But I like the carrier one. It's way more solid. You don't lose as many ships once you've built it, so it's maybe more of an investment in terms of research up front, and you can only sort of engage once you actually have reached critical mass of that carrier fleet. But I do like using it. I had a lot of fun. And generally against the Royal Navy, you want to engage them for a few months and get their patrol fleets out of order. And then you can move in, you find some sort of like more naked fleets to fight. And the Royal Navy very often actually moves their larger fleet off to help some naval invasions somewhere in Africa, the Suez Canal. Thus keeping their own, keeping the North Sea open for invasion, which is a big flaw of the AI actually. Yeah, I made a comment here about really getting defeating every ship of the Royal Navy. It's kind of hard because the AI moves the fleets around a lot and they're in repair. So generally you'll just fight with the fleet and then the fleet bunkers off, and that gives you enough time to land with your navy, and as such you have defeated the Royal Navy, but you haven't actually killed every ship. But it works really well, and you end up slaying the UK by, well, let's say early 1940. And I think you can use this strat as, well, Germany obviously, Italy for sure, Sweden quite possibly, and then maybe fascist Netherlands, and quite some other countries. So let me know what designs I may have missed or you are using yourself. I had a lot of fun making this video, trying out a few strats in the evening for a few nights in a row. I hope you like watching. See you next time.